All right. Good morning, everyone. It is 10:45 on Wednesday, October 26, 2022. I will call this meeting to order for the Community Relationships Subcommittee for the Criminal Justice Authority's Citizens Advisory Board. We'll do a quick roll call, starting with you, Miss Erin.
All right. Erin Ingolke here.
Leslie Nesmith here.
Hannah Royce, present.
June Elkins Baker, present.
Dorwin Romani, present.
All right. And if you would lead us, maybe Derwin, you want to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance this morning?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. Awesome.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you so much. The notice of this meeting was properly posted on Friday, October 21st. And first item on the agenda is public comment. Don't see that we have any today, but always want to remind the public that we are here, and this body is always welcoming to your comments and discussion. Move on to agenda item number 2. Oh, did my mic stop? Chickadee check. Awesome. Thank you. Number 2 is discussion possible action to approve our meeting minutes from September 28th. I'll entertain a motion. Accept those.
I move that we accept the minutes of September 28th.
All right. And do I have a second?
I second it.
Some more buttons working. So we're going to verbally vote and then press our button as well. So it looks like we've got a motion. Do we have a second? I know we do verbally. Thank you. All right, we've got a motion and a second. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? There we go. All right. Looks like that motion passes. Everybody got a button? I got a button. Everybody hit yes? Yep.
Yeah.
All right, awesome. Motion passes to approve those meeting minutes from September 28th. Our third item today is discussion and possible action regarding the purposes and functions of this community relationships subcommittee. And I put this item and other items on our agenda today as we have new committee members so that we can discuss what we established as our purpose for this body initially, and if there are any additional purposes or functions that we think it should serve. And I'll just open the floor to discussion. We probably won't take much action on these items today, but we'd love to hear your thoughts and ideas and how we can reimagine what community relationships looks like with the detention center in our community.
To figure out ways that we can change the negative. To figure out ways that we can change the negative relationship that so many people have with the jail. So ways that we can work on actually improving that.
Yeah.
By meeting them where they are, not demanding that they come to where we are with our expectations, but for us to be able to understand theirs.
Absolutely. I love that.
Go ahead, sister.
Oh, you sure?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. I was just thinking, in terms of better outcomes, it's always better, from what I see, if we can have some programs, some things available to people in jail to sit in solitude for weeks and months and years. That's creating something that none of us want to have to see. Right. We've got to look at people in the community that are willing to take programs into the jails. And as a mental health professional, I would definitely volunteer my time. And I know others would as well. that would be willing to go in and do some of the things, because I do know that they're short-staffed. I know that it's overwhelming when you have a lot of people that have substance abuse and mental health issues that are incarcerated. So I just think that if we could look at some of those type issues, because we've gotten away from that. The pendulum has swung completely the other way. And we really need to look at what can we provide for them while they are there.
I'm going to piggyback on that 100%. As a lived, experienced individual, that's the main thing that I became notoriously positively famous for, especially when I got down to medium and community actions. It's programs, programs, programs. Something for people to do. And quickly, even when I was at a place in Alva, Oklahoma, I just actually ran into the guy at a meeting. He was a guard, and the script was flipped. And his wife is trying to be a life coach, and I'm a life coach now. And he has asked me to help him. Then I found out I knew him. He didn't want me to go down to security. They actually tried to work a deal, but DOC couldn't do it because we ran programs so efficiently there at that boot camp. And we actually were, we're older people, so they had us sleeping in open dorms in the gym. They called the gym the minimum, but really wasn't a minimum. We were just sleeping in a gym in bunk beds. But we ran all their programs, and I agree with you totally. With my mental health background is with the Department of Mental Health. We need programs in there. I actually said that the guy that lost his life here recently. That was one of the things I don't get out. The last time you and I talked, I was going to a trial with a lady with a murder case, and she calls me now back and forth because her relatives know me. They know I deal with law. But her main thing is, I'm holding on, I'm praying, but we don't get to get out and do anything. And I had talked to Greg a couple of years back. On him, man. Let me come in and do programs. I'm certified. I'm not just the advocate, raising hell, screaming and hollering. I'm certified to teach thinking for a change. All of them. I don't go down the whole repertoire, but me and Chris Steele was joking the other day, and it's like 28 different certifications since I've been out. So these things need to be taught in there. If somebody got something to do, if I get you out and we have a session with anger management, you get to vent and get that off your chest. People's lives change. My godfather is 82 years old, and he still go down there as a guy, as a volunteer Catholic chaplain. And those connections that you make with people give people hope. If we're not doing anything for them, they're just rotting and they're getting worse. I was gonna pull it up, but if I can later on, it was ironic. Chris sent it to me last night, and I was laughing. I said it was already in my folder because I was going to speak it into the county commissioners meeting, and it talks about when you take everything away from a person, you don't give them any hope. So I would volunteer too to go in, or we could actually figure out how we can actually establish a program through team or diversion hub. Absolutely. Where we need to be visibly in there, because the last meeting, where y'all know or not, I watched it. They had brung up an impediment, and some of the board members kind of barked at it and said, why they sitting in this impediment that you got to go to every time you go to the jail, they're going to have to run all of us a background check.
Yeah. Yeah,
that's an impediment to keep us from keep going in there and seeing what's going on.
Yeah.
Because this was when I was there. I ain't been in there in over a decade. When you go to transfer from the jail to the court, people are not being fed like they're supposed to be. They forgetting to feed people. And that's not good. You don't need to be going in court hungry and agitated. You got enough stress on you already.
Kind of in thinking what they said as far as, in thinking what they said as far as the programs and things, one of the things that we hear all the time, and I don't know how true that is as far as medication. And everything that they said about the programs and keeping them busy, but then it's also their mental health. if folks are not getting their medication, so I think, that's all of that.
Can I read this just real quickly into the record? Just real quickly. This sums up everything that you were saying. And Chris had sent this to me. We want them to be responsible, but we put them in a position where there's no responsibility. We want them to be positive and contribute, but we put them in a position where they can't contribute to anything. We want them to be trustworthy, but we put them where there is no trust. We want them not to be nonviolent. We surround them with violence. We want them to be kind and loving, and we subject them in a place where it's nothing but hatred and cruelty. We want them to not be the tough guy, where we put them in a position where a person has to be tough. We want them to quit exploiting us, but we put them in a position where they have to exploit us and their family. We want them to take control of their lives, but we put them in a position where they can't be anything but dependent on us. We want them to be part of our community, but we take them away from the community and never give them the tools to get back in the community. We want them to have trust and worth, but we don't give them trust and worth. And then we call this system corrections. It was just ironic. Chris sent me that last night, and then I had it in my folder to read into the county commissioners.
Thank you for sharing that, Derwin, and thank you for all three of your thoughts and ideas on this committee. And I think that there's so many things in our next item too. We'll kind of get into that of what's actually possible, right? And wrapping our brains around things that we can chip away at and things that we can push. Are there any other thoughts on this agenda item?
I wanted to say something real fast. So we're talking about community relationships, and the people who are currently being detained or serving time in the county jail, they are part of the community, and their friends and their family and their neighbors and their schoolmates. And I say this, I think I told you guys once before, I have a son who spent a little time, just 24 hours. But I'm the community, my husband, his siblings, his experience that he had while in the county jail impacted our family. So the activities, I think, is very important. We did the focus groups the week before last, and it was important to do that. I think that in talking to the detainees, being in their cells for days at a time, or not getting a whole lot of activity, that is going to carry out into the community. We literally have a captive audience. In the literal sense, we have a captive audience of people who are currently incarcerated, and giving them things that would be productive or help them or help their mental health, or how-to books. One of my closest friends, I think I've mentioned to you guys, Stacy Coe. She spent several years incarcerated, and she's one of 2 female plumbing contractors in the state. She learned that while incarcerated. She got her licenses incarcerated, and she is now a very she's a leader in the community. She gives back, and I think that investing in those programs and getting the right people in there and the right resources in there, that will impact our community relationships for sure.
Absolutely. And that kind of leads us into the next item. We won't take any action on item 3, but item number 4 is regarding identifying the barriers preventing the Oklahoma County Detention Center detainees and families from accessing services. So, I think about, of course, what we hear most, which is that the staffing is the biggest issue. I am currently very, very interested in identifying the opportunity that the jail trust and whatever we can do to make those calls easier and more accessible to folks who cannot afford them. I know we've talked about it on this body before, but not being able to call a person that you do have, right? That could be grounds for, sending you into a mental health episode, right? I know how I feel when I can't talk to my mom on a hard day, right? So cannot imagine uh, being in a concrete cell the size of a parking space, not having that opportunity to connect. And I think whatever we can do to identify making those calls easier is at the top of my list. One of the biggest things I'd like to push to the jail trust in the next through the cab or what have you. But I think that their families, as you said, even 24 hours in that facility is going to impact not just you and your mental health, but everyone you know. And I think that begins to push us into just what are the most simple things that we can do and do it right now. And it seems like if we can have phone calls and those connections, it would be really crucial.
Yeah, Hannah, is my microphone working? Okay. I just totally agree with that. And I've had the opportunity to do a number of kind of one-on-one visits with individuals, men and women, who are currently detained at the jail. And overwhelmingly, what I heard from them was like, sure, the food could be better. Sure, would I like a more comfy bed? At the end of the day, what matters the absolute most is knowing that my family and my children are okay. They sit in those cells and worry and fret all day that their choices, they understand why they're there. And they were very candid to say, like, I get why I'm here. I'm not saying I get it, but I'm a human. I'm a person as well with a family that I love. And I worry that my kids aren't being taken care of, or that my wife is not being supported, or my partner is unwell, or whatever it is. I had men who, seemingly strong, well put together guys who were like, if I could just talk to my family and know that my kids are okay, it would be like a burden lifted off my shoulders. I would actually have hope for that day. And so I agree with like moving forward with some plan that allows the detainees to be able to connect. We were created for connection. And sadly, for the majority of the detainees, they don't have an opportunity to connect. And even within each other, it's difficult to connect, right? Because they've been put in a situation where they have not been given an opportunity to connect meaningfully. So I think paramount is connecting them with their families and their loved ones, whatever that looks like. How can we make that happen? And then 2, finding meaningful opportunities for them to connect within those 4 walls. And I don't know if now is an opportunity for me to share this, but in my role at Calm Waters as executive director, we are already moving forward with a program within the jail that I'm so, so excited about. It's never been done before in the state of Oklahoma. Quite frankly, we've only ever heard of one other program like this in the state of Maine. Very successful, but it is providing grief support, mental health support to detainees who are experiencing grief and loss. And in my conversations with the detainees as well as the staff there, they have told me, Erin, grief literally lives in this building. I mean, if you're sitting in your cell, you're grieving the life you had previously, perhaps. You're grieving the relationship that maybe is falling apart outside the jail because you don't get to be with your spouse or your partner or your kids, right? Perhaps they are losing loved ones because of death. And so being able to provide a space for the detainees to sit and talk about what they're feeling and experiencing, but also provide them healthy, reasonable coping skills is going to be so critically important. And so I'm excited that we have been invited. We're in partnership with team and with the jail to be able to provide this program. But it is just one of many, many. I mean, our support groups aren't meant for hundreds of people all at the same time. So we're talking about just a little sprinkle of help. Eventually, we want to be able to have a lot of groups, but right now it's starting small, intentionally so. But in my conversations with detainees, they said, like, we can't imagine how many people will want to participate in these groups. Everybody. So
It's
yeah.
interesting because it all ties into what you guys started. It all ties into that. We know how important that is. It's interesting that Hannah, I heard you say that the phone calls. I heard you say that they're worried, and so I think the other thing that we want to do is to make sure that they have an idea of where their family members can go to pay the rent, to pay the utility. How do I get my kid to school? Because even though it might not have been the right way to provide the living, he's been the breadwinner. And now all of a sudden, it's not there. So I think one of the first times that we convened that was stated was that they don't know those resources. And I think that that's important. And I think as people come in, what you're saying, Aaron, about the group that you're doing, what I heard you all talk about, I think that would be something really good, because so many times in the middle of trying to figure out how do I go from point A to point B, I don't have a clue. And sometimes accessing those services, we know this is not always easy, and so you need someone that will help you navigate that. That's so very important. I'm so excited because we're all on the same page, and that's what's exciting.
I have a question. Does anyone know when someone is brought in and processed? Is there some form of communication, something they fill out? You admit somebody had said something about just making sure things are done, rent is paid, dogs are fed, certain things are done. Is there some way when somebody comes in, is there a document or anything that's filled out that is then passed along to a family member, or that could be? That might be. I don't know what the possibility is of that, or if that would create a nightmare for someone. But if someone is detained and brought in, and it is a situation where they're probably going to be here for a little while, maybe there's something that they could fill out that's going to give them peace of mind, because we have to remember it is innocent until proven guilty. A lot of people are being detained who did something, and they may or may not be found guilty of it, or maybe they have been, but we've all made mistakes, and we need to recognize that. But if there's something that we can do to improve the community relationship and reduce recidivism, that has to be our goal. We don't want people coming back.
I know that the intake process is being evaluated. Yeah. And so it might not be a bad idea for us to find ways to be involved in that, or to at the very least have some of that data, because I think that could help inform us as to what are some additional ways that intake process can be improved to support the detainee and the family.
You were talking about a phone, and I know this is just me and my behavioral health mind, but is there a way in doing what you just said? Are there case managers that are there? Now, I don't know, but when I think about a case manager, then that would be the person that they could make the call with. That would be the person that they could check to make sure that everything is okay. I don't know, but there seems to be a piece that's missing. And I don't know if it's being passed off or not, but there is a piece that's missing, because that's where you start kind of building that and reassuring that. And maybe even that person can be the person that gives out the information. Oh, you need your rent is due. These are places that are given that. I mean, come up with those resources.
I'm unable to fully speak on that piece of it, but I can say that there are liaisons working in the jail at that bookend area that will be working on diversion. So stay tuned for more on that, but I do know that's in the works. And I think in talking about those barriers. Obviously, we know that financial poverty is a thing, but in all that we've talked about, relational poverty is also one of the bigger issues, right? Is losing a family, or your wife doesn't want to talk to you after you've been in jail, and yeah, you left all the rent to her, and all these types of things. And I think we've got to think about not only folks that are unable to pay for those phone calls, but the folks who maybe don't have anybody to call as well. And I think that grief support, I mean, is a huge step in that direction. I think that resources like books and games and just maybe art and things for them to do will be really helpful, because there are so many barriers that you know financial, relational, that will prevent them from accessing those. So, anything else on our item 4 discussion before we move into item 5?
Yes, I want to piggyback on something that Aaron said and something that the sister said right here. Your name one more time? June, Miss June. To piggyback on that and tie that together to how you initially said about the phone calls. I would be remiss to not to add this to it. When you talk about diversity and inclusion, which we talk about a lot, people really need, and this is our board, make sure that it is a diverse atmosphere. And I'm not going to go over a lot of old news, but when me and the current director, Greg Williams, and all this was forming, I told him, let people such as myself, whatever you put together, let us be a part of that. Those people are going to connect with us. People, to jump from that to the phone, not only is the phone not active, but the visitation process itself for the screen. I got 3 people down there that they talk to me on the phone, but one kind of knew me from the past, and he actually said that. He said, man, when I see your mannerisms, when I see that human that talking on the phone, because I'm like that, like if you text me more than 2 or 3 times, I got a little gray hair. So you text me more than 2 or 3 times, I need to talk to you. The text is, I'm not feeling the vibe from the text. I want to see you, and I see you in a visit. That's different when I see you. So to add to that, not just the phone, necessarily the phone, but the visitation.
Absolutely.
I'm having hell on right now. I can't see the people that I want to see because there's glitches in the visitation process.
And that's just available by video, correct?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think I was looking at the Tulsa County Jail's website, right? And I think even the detention center's website could do a better job at, like you said, resources, maybe connecting to how you send a digital postcard or how you can mail something, or, improving on those visual visitations, since that's not an option to be in person in general, I think is huge. Thank you, Derwin. Appreciate you. Okay, item number 5, discussion regarding identifying the greatest area of support needed for detainees and what potential community relationships could meet those needs. I know that some of our discussion has been similar to other agenda items, and that identifying the greatest area of support is a difficult thing to wrap our brains around when we know that that's a multi-pronged need. And I think that, one of the things I am currently thinking about, we've discussed a lot about today, but a fact that I learned about solitary confinement is that the brain begins to atrophy after 14 days of being in solitary. And as you mentioned, actually, I think that it's like 80% of the folks being held inside the detention center have not been charged of a crime. So we're talking 80%. We're not talking 20, the opposite. We're talking the majority of these people who are subject to a cell the size of a concrete cell, the size of a parking space. They are experiencing solitary confinement. And I don't know if it's art or, books like we've discussed, connection, that community connection. It's hard to wrap our brains around what exactly, the biggest need. And that's why I say it's a nuanced discussion, right? And I'm just grateful for all of you and your experience and your knowledge, and hopefully the community, even in the next few months, because I know our next meeting for this body will not be until January 24th. And so if we can take these next few months to really have coffee meetings, discuss with who, different programs, different, we know the areas of support are massive. And so I think to chip away at this item, we can take our time and really just get our own notes ready for what we think could improve the community relations there.
I've never heard the stats that you just gave about being in solitary confinement. I mean, that's for me. I can't even imagine.
I can't either.
And not being able, that goes beyond that connection that you talked about, and so that's really something to think about.
If it's bad for an animal, it's even worse for a human.
Oh,
God, I can't even,
Yeah, it's I'll try to send that to you all, but it was a New York Times or Washington Post like mini documentary on that. And you think about solitary confinement, that is in most prisons, right? And that you have been charged with a crime and you have done that. But if we think of 80% of these people that, regardless if they've been charged with a crime or not, potentially getting out once a week for an hour and choosing between a shower or a book, or what you want to decide. And I know that there's just, yeah, you have to remember that people are potentially sick and mentally ill when they're entering that facility, but whatever condition they were when they went in is going to be
Exacerbated.
so much worse.
so much worse when they get out.
Well,
Yeah.
isn't it law? Because I deal with law a little bit. That they're supposed to get out once every 72 hours. That's federal law. And ever since that jail has been there, y'all, that has been a back and forth thing about the recreation. And like you were saying, if you're out and making eye contact with people, there's so many programs that we can run in there. There's so many things we can do in there. And you have the carrot and the stick. And a famous warden taught me this a long time ago. He left DLC because he got tired of DLC and he went to the private prisons. And he started at CCAs, which was a positive thing. And he started this thing called Pride Therapeutic Community. They finally outlawed it, but it was a good thing for a long time. He used the carrot and the stick approach. Your behavior got your privileges. So you could have like 1 to 6. We could have colors, but your behavior, have you been, and then you get to go to these meetings. People with the carrot and the stick approach, it also encourages people to want to come out. If you just going to Celebrate Recovery, I'm just making a name up. It could be any program. It could be Aaron's program or whatever. To get to go to that is how you get. But back to your major point that you started the meeting out with is personnel and staff. Are y'all willing, and is someone from the top down going to enforce that, to let people out? I hear it from, even from my godfather. He goes over there every Wednesday, and staff will be mean spirited sometimes and don't want to go get these people out because they have that mentality. You did what you did, and you shouldn't get to go out and take confession or a spiritual visit or something. That's just not right.
I think a lot of it is staffing. I think the vast majority of the problems that we are seeing could be solved with having proper staffing levels and qualified people. I think that is that's got to be a big focus of ours.
I think that has to be probably number one, because you can make and you can make all the changes you want to externally,
Mm-hmm.
and but when you have staff that have been there, because we've been dealing with these issues for over 30 years, okay, for number one. So a lot of times, and we experience this and where we are, and I'm sure you all do too. New people come in and they're trained by the old people that have always been there, who are no longer doing what they're supposed to do.
Mm-hmm.
And so that has to happen as far as that training to understand the fact. And I think that's part of it, getting them to understand that these programs are beneficial for the recidivism rate coming back and forth. And so you may not understand it, but attend one so that you can get a greater understanding of it. So yeah, I agree with that. I think we need to deal with the staffing too.
I have one other thought, and then I promise I'll make this fast. I know we've kind of been on this subject for a minute. So years ago, a friend of mine and I, we used to volunteer at the juvenile center, and I just wonder what percentage of those kids end up here. And if there is something that we could do at that level, I don't know. I don't know what the relationship is, if there's any opportunity for that, but I can tell you that when we would go weekly and speak with, we would spend an hour with the young ladies and an hour with the young men. They looked forward to that. They could not wait to see us. And some of these kids were very violent, but they would just open up to us and talk to us, and they really looked forward to that visit. So that's just something to think about. I don't know where we go with that, but I'm curious about that.
And that's for the kids that have been directly or indirectly affected.
So the juvenile centers where kids are detained. So it would be kids that are not yet adults, that would not be brought to the to the county jail. They would be taken to the juvenile center. So some of them are there for extended periods of time.
You talking about like the Berry House?
Mm-hmm.
So that's the Berry House.
The juvenile detention center by the Chesapeake.
Yeah,
It
Chesapeake.
used to be Berry House.
Yeah.
They just call it the detention center. So we
Right.
talked about prevention versus reentry.
Mm-hmm.
That's a good focus point now. That doing prevention versus
Mhm.
reentry.
Right.
Yeah.
I know the detainees that I had the opportunity to visit with, the majority of them all had been offenders as juveniles and had returned multiple times.
And a lot of that support, right, comes from knowing that we have some of the highest ACE scores
Yes.
in the nation,
Yes.
and you know, a lot of it does point back to so many things that are beyond our control here, and even on these agenda items. But I do think that getting a better understanding of how we can maybe capture what that rate is, or
Mhm.
yeah. finding a way to do that. Anything
It's just
else?
insanity. I mean,
It is. It's hard to stomach.
Just 2 seconds, because some of y'all love to do research.
We'll look it up.
Oklahoma, when this gray head man was a kid, they had these boys' homes, they called them.
Mm-hmm.
Oklahoma made world news before we was talking about the ACE score. Oklahoma made world news. The Shame of Oklahoma was the name of the show. You can look it up. It was talking about we have the worst juvenile system, and it hasn't changed that much in about 40-some years. Now we use other technology, science like the ACE scores and stuff like that. But it made world news. The Shame of Oklahoma. It's talking about the juvenile system. You know about that?
And those are, community relationships that we got to keep in the forefront of our mind as well. Item number 6. You all ready to move on to discussion and possible action regarding identifying policy to determine what community relationships need to be enhanced? I'll speak really quickly to my thoughts on this item. Would be perhaps where we could create a survey monkey that the community gets to fill out and tell us what they think about community relationships with the detention center. And we, that would be entirely anonymous in the similar way that the other one was created for the staff. And we can all think of some questions, I'm sure off the top of our heads, but I would love to hear, because I know that this meeting is not always accessible. Folks are not comfortable coming to speak in public meetings. I know that it's an intimidating thing. And so perhaps this would be a way to mitigate some of that and really get community feedback that we need and desire to move forward on creating and formatting a policy, and identifying needs that maybe we don't even know we need to identify. So.
Do we have, I think I've asked this before, is there a suggestion program at all for the employees here at the jail? Do we know? Is there any way for them to?
I understand that there is.
Okay.
I don't know what it looks like or what form it
you-
takes, but I do understand that exists.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, that would be good to see if there have been any suggestions or if that's even been encouraged.
Glad that you mentioned that because I almost brung that up on the last on number 4 or 5, but the Survey Monkey is the big deal.
Yeah, I do think it's crucial. I know that people have a lot of thoughts on this detention center, and we're in a not so fun place, in attempting to crack this open, right? And it's not easy, and it's nuanced and layered, and giving the community an opportunity to tell us what they think in order for us to actually push that to the trust is hopefully gives them some trust and builds back that understanding that there are community members volunteering their time, whether it's here, whether it's to go speak with detainees and understand their actual experiences that could differ from what staff is telling us, right? And being that accountability piece. We're kind of a middleman, right? It's kind of how I see us, as we're a conduit. I can use Hannah Royce's voice up here all day, but my voice is nothing if I'm not closest to the people that are experiencing the issues. So I think that for me, getting a survey out, perhaps early next year or something would be really awesome. And in that in between time, we can communicate as members of this body to what those questions would be.
The Survey Monkey also, I had it a little bit reversed. The Survey Monkey also should be given to the residents, so they're telling us what their needs are. I was talking about that too, like. So when they come in after a certain period of time, maybe 2 or 3 days, they take the Survey Monkey so they can tell us what they would like and what they need.
Yeah.
So you had talked about that a little bit, Hannah, but that's, we need to know how they feel.
Absolutely. And if we're not
Like when
able,
you talking about resources, now we can get up, you said we got into January, we collaborate on all these, because this is kind of polarized, bouncing off of another meeting that I was at earlier at a intern study where the issue actually was about the police interacting with inner city people and the police going out to the schools. So they was making sure that the police are seen not as the villains anymore, as they go out. I forget the actual name of it, but they finna get a statewide deal on that. But they was making sure they get the surveys so they could get what the people need, so that when police walk up on children, they wasn't feared. It's the same thing like the jail trust and us and community subcommittee. We're not the enemy. We're really here to find out what they're not doing and what can be done better. And if they get a survey, because most people, I'm one of them guys like, oh man, they playing a game. I'm not signing that paper. That's just another game, man. I caught a case. Let's don't lock me up. But if you get that survey and they know it's genuine, authentic, and genuine, that you can have concern for them, they would sign it and you will get the best feedback.
I agree. I think we can do, one that's outward facing, one that's internal, and kind of follow what the policies and procedures subcommittee, it was recruitment and retention.
Yeah,
right?
it's the recruitment and retention.
They created one for staff feedback survey not too long ago. So we can follow that similar process to create that. Lots of great discussion. I'm very grateful for each of you We'll move on to number 7 if you don't have anything further. So we've got our regular meetings, no more special meetings. We set the calendar year for 2023, and that can be found little attachment there. So our next meeting will be January 25th, and the rest of those are mentioned there.
It's noted incorrectly on number 8.
Oh,
It says
24th.
January 24th.
You're right.
So just to note that.
Thank you. Appreciate you. I don't have a calendar right in front of me. It's supposed to be on Wednesday.
25th.
I just don't know what that date is, if it's actually the 24th or the 25th.
The 24th is a Tuesday.
Okay, so it is the 25th. Yeah. Awesome. So it is Wednesdays at 10:45 and back in this room. Do we need to take a vote on accepting this, but if the one, I think they're listed correctly on Lynn's
They are.
regular one. Do it. It does, just on item 7. It says
Or
the
on
24th.
8.
Yeah,
On
or
item
8. Sorry,
on the
sorry.
agenda, yeah.
Thank you so much, Michaela. So let's potentially entertain a motion to accept that regular meetings calendar. Is that right? Because did we do that last time? Okay. Perfect. Thank you. So this is the proposed regular meetings schedule. And if you all are amenable to it, we can entertain a motion to accept this as our 2023 calendar.
I motion to accept it.
Awesome. Do we have a second?
I second.
Wonderful. Everybody. Yep, I think she did. So we'll vote. We haven't voted on anything today other than our minutes. All in favor when it pops up. Okay. All opposed. Looks like that motion passes. Announcement for our next scheduled meeting, as discussed, Wednesday, January 25th at 10:45 a.m.
2023.
2023, y'all. Can you believe it?
We're talking about January.
January.
My 30-year high school reunion.
Oh,
in
wow.
2023.
Oh.
What year?
It'll be my 30 year. I can't even believe I'm saying that. But my oldest son just turned 29.
Oh.
I have my first grandbaby.
All right. Item 9, I will entertain a motion to adjourn on the 50 years.
I
Perfect.
second.
All right. Everybody in favor, vote when you pop up. Yes. Any opposed? Motion passes. We are adjourned. Thank you so much.
Bye.
Appreciate you.
Oh yeah. Well, it's next. It's in 2023, but I will. Yes, I've got one too. Good to see ya.